Most people think they've reached their limit, when in reality, they've only reached their discomfort. That moment where things feel hard, when your mind starts telling you to stop, feels like the end. But it's not. It's just the point where most people quit. And if you never move past it, you never find out what you're actually capable of.
Man, it's a really heavy realization to sit with.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're exploring the exact biological and psychological mechanisms that trap us in our comfort zones. And, we're looking at the extreme lengths a tiny percentage of people go to break out of them.
Right, because everything we're looking at today revolves around this one piece of mental software. It's what the sources call the governor.
Yeah, the governor. So to kick this off, how exactly does that work in the brain?
Well, you can see it really vividly in automotive engineering, actually. Like if you take a high-performance stock car, under the hood,
Yeah.
it has this massive reservoir of potential. The engine is fully capable of pushing that car well over 130 miles per hour.
Right, without tearing itself apart.
Exactly. But the manufacturers install a physical governor. It's a piece of hardware designed to artificially limit the flow of fuel and air into the engine.
So it deliberately caps the performance.
Yeah, it keeps the car safely within conventional driving speeds just to prevent the engine from ever running too hot or, losing stability.
And the human mind operates with an almost identical mechanism.
It does. We have a governor buried deep in our neurology. It's intricately tied to our survival instincts and even our core identity.
So it's basically self-preservation software.
Precisely. And it delivers highly personalized, targeted feedback designed specifically to make you stop. It uses physical pain, deep exhaustion, crippling fear, profound insecurity, all to artificially cap our performance.
It's just flooding the system with signals that we are completely tapped out.
Yeah, simply to keep us safely inside our physiological and psychological comfort zones.
But the really fascinating divergence here is that unlike a car's mechanical hardware, our mental governor doesn't wield absolute control.
Right. It's not dictatorial.
It can't actually force the body to stop moving unless we consciously or subconsciously buy into its narrative and agree to quit. Like, the physical signals are real, but the limit they represent is often just an illusion.
That's a great way to put it.
It reminds me of the smartphone analogy. Think about your phone going into low battery mode.
Oh, yeah.
You hit 40%, and suddenly the screen dims, the processor throttles down to a crawl, and background apps just start force closing.
Right. The phone is behaving like catastrophic failure is imminent.
Exactly. It acts like it's about to die. But in reality, there is still nearly half the battery life left. It's prematurely shutting down its own capabilities simply to delay the inevitable.
And that low battery illusion is exactly what the sources refer to as the 40% rule.
A 40% rule?
Yeah. The premise is just staggering. It says that when you reach that point of total exhaustion, when your mind is screaming at you that you are entirely done, that your muscles have absolutely nothing left to give, you've usually only tapped into about 40% of your actual maximum capacity.
Wait, really? Only 40%?
Only 40%. The remaining 60% is locked behind this massive wall of psychological friction.
So if 99% of people hit that 40% wall and just accept it as a hard biological limit, what exactly is happening in the brains of that 1% who push past it? I mean, are they biologically different, or is our brain actively lying to us in those moments?
It's not that they're biologically different, and the brain isn't exactly lying out of malice. It's evolutionary preservation working flawlessly, just deployed in the entirely wrong context.
How so?
Well, for hundreds of thousands of years, conserving energy was literally a matter of life and death. If you burned all your caloric reserves running down an animal, and then a predator appeared, you died.
So the brain evolved to treat extreme energy expenditure as a mortal threat.
Exactly. And today, we interpret that protective, ancient signal, which manifests as deep discomfort and fatigue, as a hard physical boundary. We accept the 40% illusion as absolute reality because our biology is telling us we'll die if we don't.
And people will fiercely defend that limitation, too. There's this deeply telling anecdote in the materials about a panel discussion at MIT.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. So you have this esteemed, tenured professor, someone whose entire academic life's work was dedicated to researching mental toughness. And he stands up in front of a room of elite minds and definitively states that humans possess genetic hard ceilings.
Yeah, he argued that there are fixed biological limitations baked into our DNA. And once you hit that invisible genetic ceiling, no amount of grit or willpower matters. You simply cannot go any further.
He called it a biological absolute. And the craziest part is, the entire room of academics and researchers just accepted the premise without question.
Well, when a leading expert presents a theory backed by decades of credentials, it offers a really comforting narrative.
Mhm.
Believing in insurmountable genetic ceilings totally lets us off the hook.
It's the ultimate intellectual excuse for quitting.
Exactly. Because if the ceiling is genetic, then your failure to push further isn't a lack of willpower. It's not a failure of character, it's just science.
But the counter-narrative presented in these sources, a reality lived by a tiny fraction of individuals who actively choose to armor their minds, proves those so-called scientific odds can be completely dismantled.
Right. Those genetic ceilings might accurately describe the vast majority of the population who voluntarily stop when the governor kicks in, but there's a fraction of a percent willing to suffer through the illusion and tap into that hidden 60%.
Which brings up the ultimate dilemma of extreme performance. If that 40% wall is basically a neurological parlor trick, how does someone differentiate between a mental illusion and catastrophic physical damage?
That is the million-dollar question. And to understand how to decode that extreme discomfort, we have to look at the outer edges of human endurance.
Like the San Diego one-day race.
Exactly. The sources detail this event. It's a brutal ultramarathon requiring competitors to run 101 miles in 24 hours. And the individual profiled in the sources attempted this race with absolutely zero cardiovascular preparation.
Zero. And he was taking a powerlifter's physique into a 100-mile endurance race, which is a recipe for absolute physiological collapse.
Oh, it's a nightmare. We are talking about dense, heavy muscle mass built for short bursts. It's incredibly oxygen-hungry and mathematically catastrophic to carry over 100 miles of pavement.
And the breakdown was systematic and severe. I mean, by mile 70, this individual is sitting in a lawn chair near the start-finish line. Their body is in open rebellion.
Yeah, their kidneys are actively failing, struggling to filter the massive amounts of muscle protein breaking down into the bloodstream.
Their feet are covered in stress fractures. The bones are physically cracking under the unaccustomed impact.
Right, and they are severely dehydrated, dropping blood pressure, and literally seeing the world in triplicate. Every biological alarm bell is ringing, signaling that terminal failure is imminent.
Okay, wait, I have to respectfully push back on the framing here. If your kidneys are shutting down and your metatarsals are literally splintering, isn't that an actual physical limit? Like, how does someone differentiate between a signal of catastrophic physical damage and just a signal of discomfort?
And that is the totally rational response. To a medical professional or any rational observer, those are hard physical limits where immediate intervention is required.
Right. The engine is blowing up.
It is. But what this extreme, agonizing example demonstrates is the terrifying, almost incomprehensible power of the mind to consciously override physiological destruction. When you sit in that lawn chair at mile 70, broken and failing, you come face to face with what the sources call the quitting mind.
The quitting mind.
Yeah. It is desperate to find an exit strategy, so it begins to interrogate you.
It's exactly like a ruthless defense attorney cross-examining a witness on the stand. The quitting mind is pacing back and forth in your head, looking for any loophole, any slight hesitation.
Yes, and it starts asking those simple questions. Why are you out here destroying yourself? What do you actually have to prove? Wouldn't it be warmer and safer to just stop right now?
And if your internal defense isn't absolutely airtight, if you stumble for even a microsecond trying to justify the suffering, that attorney wins the argument, you surrender.
Because the illusion of the physical limit becomes a concrete reality the exact second you choose to stop answering those questions. The pain is so overwhelming that logic starts to bend to the will of comfort.
But the individual in the source didn't lose that internal argument. They managed to stand up from that lawn chair on fractured feet, utterly defying the biological imperative to stop.
They chose to let the engine keep running.
But that psychological shift doesn't just happen by magic. I mean, if you were on mile 70 and your internal organs are failing, positive affirmations aren't going to save you. What is the actual physiological mechanism these extreme athletes are using to force the body to keep moving when it's tearing itself apart?
The mechanism is a forced hijacking of the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
When you push past the point of maximum effort and flatly refuse to quit despite blinding agony, the brain undergoes a radical shift in strategy. The sources describe another instance of this during Navy SEAL training.
Right, the broken shins.
Yeah, a candidate forced to run for miles on literal broken shins, which had been bound tightly in duct tape, just to keep the splintered bones stable enough to bear weight.
Just the sheer mechanics of bone grinding against bone with every footfall. It's visceral just to think about.
The individual described the first 30 minutes of running on broken bones as a typhoon of unadulterated agony. Every step was a shockwave of pain traveling up the leg. But by refusing to stop, by aggressively answering the quitting mind's simple questions with sheer unyielding defiance, the biology changes.
The brain realizes that the pain isn't a signal to conserve energy for a later fight. The fight for survival is happening right now.
Exactly. The threat is immediate. So the brain drops the governor entirely because conservation is no longer a viable survival strategy.
It just abandons the preservation strategy.
Completely. Around the 40-minute mark, the central nervous system releases its emergency reserves. Endorphins flood the bloodstream, chemically dulling the pain receptors. Cortisol and adrenaline spike dramatically.
So the pain doesn't vanish, but it recedes.
It recedes to a manageable low tide. The hormonal flow physically alters your perception of reality because the prefrontal cortex has successfully commanded the amygdala to stop panicking.
It forces it to focus entirely on the mechanics of survival. But to actually trigger that hormonal cascade, you need raw psychological fuel. You can't run on empty.
You really can't.
The sources outline a concept called the cookie jar. And just to be clear for everyone listening, this has absolutely nothing to do with visualization boards or motivational quotes.
Oh, not at all. The cookie jar is deeply grounded in the science of neuroplasticity. It's a mental repository where you consciously store all of your past traumas.
Like growing up in severe poverty or enduring horrific physical or emotional abuse.
Yeah, facing extreme adversity alongside all of your past victories and moments where you overcame statistically impossible odds.
You are essentially weaponizing your own history.
Weaponizing your history.
Exactly. When the darkness closes in at mile 70, or when your shins are fracturing, you reach into the mind, pull out a specific memory, and remind yourself of exactly what you have survived. You use the empirical evidence that you've been through hell before as proof that you can survive the hell you are in right now.
And by doing that, you're consciously firing neural pathways associated with extreme resilience. Most people allow unhealed trauma to keep them soft, fearful, or highly reactive to stress.
Right.
The cookie jar methodology uses that trauma as high-octane cognitive fuel. By consciously recalling past survival mechanisms, you physically override the amygdala's primitive panic response, which is begging you to quit with the prefrontal cortex's executive control.
You take ownership of your suffering.
Yes, and doing so shrinks time, forcing you to focus entirely on surviving the present micro-moment rather than being crushed by the overwhelming distance left to travel.
Okay, but applying that level of mental callousing blindly sounds like a fast track to the emergency room. I mean, if we all possess this massive untapped 60% reserve, how do we safely access it? You can't just wake up tomorrow, decide to ignore your governor, and go run 100 miles.
No, please don't do that. The crucial methodology detailed in the sources is the 5 to 10% rule.
The 5 to 10% rule.
Yeah. The key to safely and permanently removing the mental governor isn't a massive, reckless leap. It is a process of gradual, mathematically calculated expansion.
So, for example, if your absolute maximum number of push-ups, the point where your arms literally give out and you collapse, is 100, you don't set an alarm and aim for 200 the next day.
Right. You push 105 or 110.
And that tiny margin is where the neurological rewiring actually occurs.
Exactly. By pushing 5 to 10% past the exact moment your mind starts screaming at you to stop, you are proving to the governor that the perceived limit was an illusion. The body didn't break.
So the next week, 110 becomes your new baseline. It's your new normal, and you push 5 to 10% further again.
And this isn't just about extreme physical feats either.
Right. This translates perfectly to everyday life. If you're studying for a massive medical exam or you're prepping an intricate presentation for work and your brain feels entirely fried after 2 hours of deep, unbroken focus, that is your 40% governor kicking in.
It's the exact same software. Your mind is deploying cognitive fatigue to protect your energy reserves.
You start feeling brain fog, you get the overwhelming urge to check your phone or just walk away. Pushing to 2 hours and 10 minutes, forcing the brain to stay engaged when it is begging for a distraction, is how you callous your mind intellectually.
Because the neurological software adapts to that specific friction. By voluntarily introducing friction into your daily life, by intentionally choosing to do things that make you intensely uncomfortable, you build the protective callus over your mind.
It makes a lot of sense.
Think about an individual who has never lifted weights in their life. On their first day at the gym, their palms are soft and unconditioned. When they grip a heavily knurled pull-up bar, the friction tears their hands open. It's a painful, highly uncomfortable experience.
But if they consistently return to that bar, day after day, the body adapts to the friction by building thick, protective, physical calluses. Eventually, they can hang on that rough steel for hours without registering any pain whatsoever.
And the mind responds to cognitive and emotional friction in the exact same manner.
You are systematically training your amygdala to stop overreacting to discomfort, whether that discomfort is physical pain or just sheer cognitive boredom.
Yes, and we have to be honest, this process is brutal and it's entirely nonlinear. The sources dive deeply into the reality of catastrophic failure during this callousing process. There's a vivid breakdown of an attempt to break the Guinness World Record for pull-ups.
Oh man, the target was 4,030 pull-ups in a 24-hour period.
Right. And the first attempt to break that record happened on live national television. The pressure was immense, that cameras were rolling, and despite months of intense, obsessive preparation, the body simply shut down.
The individual hit roughly 2,500 pull-ups and experienced total catastrophic muscle failure. They physically could not lift their arms to reach the bar. It was a massive, highly public failure.
But here is the critical shift in perspective regarding the 5 to 10% rule. Failure isn't just a collection of data points or a polite opportunity to learn. Failure is the exact, precise mechanism that moves the 40% governor.
Wow, okay.
If you do not reach a state of absolute, undeniable failure, where the muscles simply cease to function and the mind is in total revolt, the governor never learns the body can actually survive that extreme level of stress.
So the baseline never moves. You literally have to trigger the governor's absolute panic, survive it, and then the brain recalibrates what is possible.
Which explains the grim reality of the second attempt in Nashville. They moved away from the TV cameras to a gritty, dungeon-like gym. But the physical breakdown there wasn't muscle failure.
No, it was skin failure.
Yeah. By pull-up 2,500, the friction had literally split their palms open down to the raw flesh. They tried wrapping the bar in tape, they tried multiple layers of gloves, but the physical damage was just too severe.
They had to pull the plug a second time, falling 800 pull-ups short of the world record. After two highly public, agonizing failures, severe physical injury, and a chorus of physiological experts claiming the goal was biologically impossible for someone with that much muscle mass, the rational choice is to quit.
Most people would.
But because the mind had been so thoroughly calloused by previous suffering, and because the cookie jar was full of evidence of overcoming past impossibilities, they recalibrated.
They adjusted the mechanics of the bar, implemented heavy foam pads to protect the torn hands, and locked into an almost cyborg-like psychological trance. And on the third attempt, they completely shattered the record, completing over 4,000 pull-ups.
It is a staggering testament to the sheer volume of potential lying dormant on the other side of the governor. But, the sources also highlight a very subtle, dangerous trap waiting at the finish line of these massive achievements.
Yeah, the ego trap.
Right. You break the record, you run the 100 miles, and the human ego immediately wants to declare victory. The ego wants to say, I have arrived, I am the toughest person alive, and I never have to suffer like that again.
And the antidote to that ego trap is a philosophy born in Army Ranger School, known as starting at zero.
Starting at zero.
In Ranger School, your past accolades mean absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter if you're a decorated general or a fresh recruit straight out of basic training. Everyone wears the same uniform, nobody has rank, and you're treated like an absolute beginner.
The foundational mindset is that the refrigerator is never full.
Exactly. The fundamental philosophy of starting at zero means that no matter how extraordinary your achievement was yesterday, you wake up today with a balance of zero. Past victories do not pay today's physiological or psychological rent.
So if you finish a massive ultramarathon or secure a huge promotion at work, you acknowledge the accomplishment. But the very next morning, you reset the internal counter.
You have to be willing to embrace total ignorance and become the beginner all over again in a completely new domain.
Because that relentless, deliberate pursuit of new friction is the only way to continually expand your capacity. It prevents that mental governor from quietly creeping back in to establish a new, slightly larger comfort zone.
It frames discomfort not as a threat to be avoided, but as the literal gateway to the 60% of ourselves we haven't even met yet.
If there's one thing to take from this, it's that your limits are not as fixed as they feel. Most of what you think is the end is just where discomfort begins. And the life you say you want often sits on the other side of that moment. So the question is, How often are you stopping when you don't actually have to?